Well, the first comic that comes to mind is the first one I ever bought. That was Justice League of America #6, The Wheel of Misfortune. And even though I had looked at comics before, I have two older brothers, so there were some comics around the house, you know. That was the first one I bought with my own money, my own allowance money. And I still remember that story. I still remember the cover, the phenomenal cover. And it probably set me on the course that, you know, became my adult livelihood for a good number of years, and that I'm still tinkering with as somebody who does private art commissions. So that probably had a, you know, huge influence on me. I even stole the ending from that particular issue for an issue of Sleepwalker. You know, I didn't steal it directly, but I stole the idea of the ending, the twist at the ending, because it had made such an impact on me when I was a kid. Growing up, I grew up reading DC Comics, which had those assured characters who never had a chink in their armor. There was never anything, you know, the worst thing you could say about Barry Allen was he was late all the time. You know, the worst thing you could say about Clark Kent was he'd show up late for dates with Lois, or, you know. And with Marvel, they started the whole thing with Spider-Man, you know, being this nerdy high school student who couldn't get a, who always had to worry about his Aunt May and making and trying to get good grades and being bullied at school and the girls and all that. And meanwhile, he's Spider-Man, you know, and Fantastic Four had their own problems and so on and so forth. So as I grew older, as I was, you know, going through my childhood, I went from DC to Marvel, because Marvel was, I guess, a bit more sophisticated in the way they treated their people. They were much more three-dimensional. I collected comics as a child. When I got to high school, when I got to 9th grade, I said, well, this is a childish thing, and I'm going to stop collecting comics, which I did. And then I got to college, and in college, I became an artist on the student newspaper. And a fellow artist in the student newspaper, coincidentally, both of us were civil engineering majors, but we were both liked drawing. So we were both artists in the student newspaper. He was into comics. So he introduced me to a comic which I was unfamiliar with. It hadn't existed when I was a child. It's Conan the Barbarian, which was so different and so beautifully illustrated, and the stories were so great that I became a comic book fan. So if anything, you know, that first Justice League comic got me interested in comics and, you know, created a passion for it within me. But it was Conan that got me back into comics. So I thank my friend Chun-Wai Fong, and I thank him for introducing me to Conan. And that's what led to me eventually sticking with it and eventually getting a job at Marvel, probably. You know, I can really speak from my own experience more than anything about why people get attached to certain characters, certain properties. So many of these characters and properties, these sci-fi, fantasy, genre-type properties, they really spark the imagination. And if it hits you at the right time, the right age, the right phase of your life, you get really connected to it. I'm sure my reaction to picking up a comic book today would be light years different from what it was when I bought my first comic when I was 7 years old or whenever I was. You know, so it hit me back then, and I got attached to certain things. And I think that's, you know, I don't think anything much has changed in that regard. I think people are looking for escapism in all sorts of forms, and certain things just hit them the right way. Okay, so the definition of nostalgia to me, not that I've given it a lot of thought in the past, but I suppose nostalgia is a feeling for something that meant a lot to a person at a younger time in their lives. So they still have a fondness for that item, and it could be an old TV show, it could be a comic book character, it could be a book, it could be it could be an experience. It could be, you know, I'm nostalgic for a theme park that no longer exists, you know, or a beach that I used to visit when I was, you know, growing up with my parents would take me to during the summer, or something like that. So I think it's just a lingering fondness for something, for an experience, whatever it is, that you may not have access to anymore, but has an emotional a connection to you throughout your life.